Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Junior English. We are in the MyPerspectives Volume Unit 3, and I'm with you on page 282 and following. We will begin, first of all, with the essential question noticed there on page 282. In what ways does the struggle for freedom change with history? As you read these selections, work with your whole class to explore the struggle for freedom from text to topic. For Frederick Douglass, the struggle for freedom meant a perilous escape from slavery. For Abraham Lincoln, it meant waging war against his fellow citizens. The issue of slavery polarized the country before the Civil War. As you read, consider what the selections show about the struggle for freedom during the focus period and its relationship to our ideas of freedom today. Please note the whole class learning strategy on page 282. You have the list on 283 of the readings that we will be looking at. And now, if you will, please, on 284, let's work with the historical perspectives for Unit 3 focus period 1850 to 1890. Please notice our timeline at the bottom as we've been paying attention to it. We will also have three sets of quotes, one from Stowe, one from Lincoln, and one from Douglass that I'm hopeful that you're looking at. Let's now turn to the history of the period and again our headings. The first one, Dreams of Shaping Society. More than any other nation, the United States was founded on dreams people had of shaping the society in which they lived. The Puritans who colonized New England came to build a new society, a society in which they could freely practice their religion. Some 150 years later, the American revolutionaries wrote a constitution that gave citizens powerful tools to continue reshaping society. Tools such as freedom of speech and an elected representative government. With these tools, citizens could change the course of the country. Heading 2, the crisis of slavery. By 1850, though, the question of whether those tools were enough became grave. About 88% of the African Americans in the country, approximately 14% of the nation's total population, were enslaved. Treated as property, forced to work for others, torn in many cases from their own families, and subject to various other abuses and cruelties. Many in the nation cried out for change, but the economy of the South depended on the use of enslaved African Americans for labor. When challenged, many in the South rallied to the defense of the institution. In the North, industry was replacing agriculture as the motor of the economy. Northern states had begun passing anti-slavery laws in the 18th century, and by 1850, slavery had all but vanished in the North. Critics of slavery were becoming vocal in their opposition, with abolitionists campaigning against slavery and assisting runaway slaves. By the way, note the integration of knowledge and ideas chart that is on page 285 that talks about population, cotton production, and U.S. factories and employees in 1861. Civil War, next heading. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860, the divisions between North and South only sharpened. Beginning with South Carolina in 1860, 11 southern states seceded, that is to say separated, from the United States. In 1861, the Civil War began, pitting North against South. After years of suffering and devastation, the North won the war in 1865. This victory set the nation's future course, for it decided the issue of slavery. No longer would anyone be enslaved in the United States. In addition, it made clear the fact that the centers of economic influence in the country had shifted from the agricultural South to the industrial North. Finally, it confirmed the strength of the country's central government in relation to the states. Our next heading, expansion and progress. Before the Civil War, the country had been busily expanding, adding new territories and states as settlers pushed west seeking land. After the war, the country continued to grow at a furious pace. Settlers continued to move west, forcing Native Americans from their lands. Immigrants flooded the nation's cities, providing labor. For the first time, electricity was being used on a large scale for everything from city lights to factory machines. The nation began linking frontiers to cities with railway tracks and telegraph wires. Our next heading is reform movements. While forces such as westward expansion and immigration were reshaping the nation, reformers were attempting to transform society. Pioneers such as Horace Mann championed public education Other activists pushed forward reforms of the justice system, leading to the development of the modern prison. During this period, women also began pursuing political and economic rights equal to men's. A historic convention is our next heading. In the years around 1850, women were discouraged from playing most major roles in public life. Their rights to property were limited. In addition, women did not yet have the right to vote. In 1848, Elizabeth Catan Stanton and Lucretia Mott helped organize the Seneca Falls Convention, which met to discuss women's rights. There, Stanton introduced a resolution to pursue the right to vote for women. With the support of Frederick Douglass, a former slave and an active abolitionist, the resolution passed. The movement for women's rights. Reformers such as Stanton, Mott, and Susan B. Anthony campaigned vigorously for women's rights. Their tactics included lobbying politicians, holding public lectures, publishing newspapers, picketing, and marching. Social progress. Some reforms were seen at the time. Even before the Seneca Falls Convention, some states had passed laws giving women the right to their own property, although their husbands still had the right to manage shared properties. Some states, including ones newly added to the Union, passed laws allowing women to vote. The right to vote was not granted to women nationwide, however, until the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution in 1920. A nation comes of age. In the decades from 1850 to 1914, the United States grew from a largely agricultural society into a modern industrial giant. During this time, important issues such as freedom of African Americans, the rights of women, the rights of workers were discussed and argued. In the end, the society of the United States was reshaped not just by reformers, but by forces such as war, technological progress, the economic development. These forces laid the foundations of the nation we know today. And the last heading, a legacy of protest. The issues of power and change raised during the period were not resolved once and for all. However, even though slavery had been abolished, injustices against African Americans continued. New eras of protest were born in the effort to end racial discrimination. Women's lives had generally improved, but voting equality was still an unachieved goal, and other forms of inequality continued to reign. Protests continued. The literature in this unit tells of the ongoing struggle for social justice. On page 287, I'd like for you please to note the literature selections as well as the connections across time. And now let's turn to our Unit 3 readings. Thank you.